Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's event, Unlock the Stories of Your Past, presented by the Genealogy Society Singapore. My name is Catherine Koo, and I'll be your MC for this exciting afternoon of discovery. Right, whether you're just beginning your journey into genealogy or looking to overcome challenges in your research, today's talks and discussion will inspire you with personal stories, expert insights, and practical tips. We'll hear from two incredible speakers, followed by a panel discussion where you get to ask your burning questions to our experts. Right, so let's dive into this fascinating world of tracing family roots together. Before we begin, as usual, a quick note. Please silence your mobile devices. Feel free to take notes and save your questions for our panel discussion later. Right now, let me introduce the first speaker. Our first speaker, Mr. Leong Boon Choo, is a true global citizen with a career spanning banking, insurance, and automotive sectors across 8 countries, correct? Okay. From Malaysia to London, where he served as global CFO for ABN AMRO. Born in Malacca and now a Singaporean, Boon Choo is also an accomplished author, penning Rights to the World and The Democratic Outcome State. Despite his demanding career, he's deeply curious about the stories hidden in everyday life and across cultures. Today, he'll share his personal journey in tracing my roots. Join me in welcoming Mr. Leong Boon Choo.
Thank you, Catherine. I don't think many of you here know me. I'm a relative new member to GSS. And sometime 3 weeks ago, I got a text from Mr. Ng. And Mr. Ng asked if I could call him back when I had the time, and I did. And he asked me if I could share my story on my ancestry search. Because it came from Mr. Ng, I said, yes, straight away. And when I promised him and I put the phone down, I thought, oh gosh, there must be more interesting genealogical stories out there than mine, because mine, I think, is relatively straightforward. But as Mr. Ng had asked for the sharing of my journey, I thought that would be the interesting bit. Because if I can't make my search more exciting than other people's search, the least I could do is to make it genuine. And I think that I can do. So I'll talk about my background, but before I do that, I just want to share with you an experience that I had maybe about 30-something years ago as a 26-year-old. I had just spent about a year in New Zealand, in Auckland, working for what was then known as Pete Marwick Mitchell, which later became KPMG. And when I finished my assignment, I was on the way to Australia, and I had 2 months. And because it was an intense 1 year, I said to myself, I haven't seen much of New Zealand. I wanted to see Wellington. I wanted to cross the island to the south, to Picton, and see Marlborough Sounds, see Christchurch, and then head to Dunedin, and then back to Queenstown, and then I think back to Auckland after that. But being a restless 26-year-old, I didn't want to spend a lot of money. I thought, well, I'm just going to backpack and hitchhike all the way. I resolved not to spend a single cent on transportation. And I would hitchhike all the way, right from Auckland all the way down to Dunedin, and then back up again. The only time when I would spend money on transportation would be on the ferry, from the south to the north and the north to the south. I obviously couldn't swim across the channel, right? So I did that. And as I went down, I hitchhiked, and I rode on cars, I rode on potato trucks, I rode on motorbikes. A lot of kindness, a lot of compassion. But it was also a dangerous year, and those of you who know New Zealand know that places like Auckland are full of motorbike gangs. They call them bikie gangs, and they've got very aggressive names. Names like the Mongrel Mob, Black Power, Hell's Angels, right? And they were quite violent. So I remember in one of the months when I was there, the gangs were quarreling, and I think they got one of the girls from another gang, and that poor girl was gang raped by 15 men. And those of you who've been to New Zealand and know or have heard of these gangs, they're generally Maoris and big blokes, right? So as I was hitchhiking, I was sort of conscious of that, and I was south of Christchurch in the middle of winter, southern winter. I was south of Christchurch on the way to Dunedin, and it was at night, right? I put my thumb out, dark roads, few cars, one or two passed by, and then one stopped, obviously excited, and I got a ride, right? When the ride came, I opened the door. It was a big, burly Maori guy with tattoo half the face and very gruff individual. Come right in, right? So I thought, oh shit, should I go in or should I just surrender myself to my fate? So, but he'd been kind enough to offer a ride. I should be brave enough to take. So I went in, and that was the nicest person you could ever meet. And we had about half an hour on a journey, and I learned from him about his family, about his community, and as he was about to reach his community, he was going to turn right, and I had to go south to Dunedin, and this was 1988. No mobile phones, right? And he knew his community, he knew his place. So he said, I'm going to turn right back to my community. You're going south, you're going to go ahead. But it's 9 o'clock in the southern winter. It was cold, no mobile phone. He said, I'm going to drop you off here, but there's a payphone. Here's my number, right? I was the nicest guy, and I felt bad initially doubting him even. And I said, I thank you for your ride, and I really appreciate it, and I wasn't intending to trouble him anymore. And as I got down, he did say, I don't think you're going to get a ride, but here's a number anyway. So I said, thank you very much. I was ready to just camp out there with my tent and all that I had. So an hour passed, no car. 2 hours passed, no cars. And it was cold. It was very cold. So I thought, oh, well, what the hell? I'll give him a call. I called him on the payphone. 20 minutes later, he came back out, fetched me to his house. His wife was nursing a little kid, right? And said, go and have a shower if you want, right? So I had a shower. Next morning, he fed me breakfast, took me out to the junction again where I got my ride. Now, my original intent was to see all the cities, Marlborough Sound, Picton, Christchurch, Dunedin, Queenstown. If you ask me about that journey, I remember very little of the places that I intended to visit. But seared in my mind was Taro, his family, and the way he treated me. Now, when Mr. Ng said, talk about your journey, I think that in a way encapsulates where I am in my ancestry search, right? And if I was looking for something, the name of the songs that plays in my mind, I still haven't found what I was looking for, right? And I haven't found what I was looking for, but I think I found things that I didn't realize I was looking for. So back to my ancestry story, I think it's important for you to know my background. I'm an old Malacca boy. I was born in Malacca. I was born into the family of a luckless fishmonger. He wasn't very lucky. He wasn't very good at business. He had a horrible spot in the local market where people don't go to, right? And my mom used to complain, look, I mean, you lose all the money that I give you to. So we grew up poor. I was born into a house in the Bukit China area. For those of you who know Malacca, Malacca is obviously one of the earliest Chinese settlements overseas, for overseas Chinese. And Bukit China is where the Chinese community first gathered, right? Very old community, and you see all long houses. And if you see some of the graves around the Bukit China, they go back centuries. And obviously, growing up in Malacca, your friends are going to be predominantly Baba Peranakan. I'm not Baba Peranakan myself, but a lot of my friends are. I mean, Baba Peranakans are very loyal people, but they're a pain in the butt to work with. Extremely straight, but frustrating to work with. I would just remember friends of mine would just casually tell me, well, you know, my family, I can trace 9 generations, all in Malacca. But that didn't mean much to me. I came from a poor family, but the one thing that I remember from young was that my family, especially on my father's side, was dysfunctional. Dysfunctional to the extent that he had 7 brothers. He was the 7th. 7 in a family, and then 1 daughter at the end. Finally got a daughter. In other words, my grandfather had 7 kids, all boys, and 1 daughter. My grandfather died when the boys were all very young, not adults. And for some reason, I don't know why, it was a dysfunctional family. My father never really spoke to his brothers, and the brothers never spoke to one another. And, you know, the children were brought up separately, and I don't recall going to my uncle's place and things like that. So it wasn't a close family. What I do remember is when I was 10 years old, a letter arrived from China, and this seared in my mind again. A letter arrived from China, and it asked my uncle to get all the brothers to help them. And that letter came from members of their family. In other words, my grandfather had other sons in China, right? So he had 7 siblings. I forgot to mention this. 4 of whom were in Malacca. 3 brothers were in China. And the 3 brothers that were in China were not close because the grandfather wasn't around. He died early. And when that letter came, that letter created even more tensions in the family. The contents of the letter were very clear. I mean, in 1972, I was a 10-year-old. The contents of the letter were, we're doing badly, we really need help, we need food, we need clothing, and please send us some money, right? The family was dysfunctional to begin with, and we were poor. My uncles were also poor. So that letter meant that they had to come together and contribute, right? There was no money to contribute. I don't know, I can't remember if they contributed clothes, money, food, but when it came to the money bit, I recall a quarrel amongst the brothers, saying who's got money to give and who would give more, right? And that stuck in my mind, not because I remember the letter, I just remember the tension around that letter. And together, in the end, after all that tension, they scrounged together 100 ringgit to pass on to the relatives in China. Now, the impression I got from the way it was put together was, here's the 100, we're poor, we don't have money, and we really don't want to connect. we really hope that you don't write to us again, right? And I don't know whether they wrote to us again or not, but that was seared in my mind. They helped to the extent that they could, reluctantly, and please don't contact us again. We really don't need a letter like yours coming to us. So fast forward 53 years, right? I was having lunch with Nathan Koh here, and many of you know Nathan, of course. Nathan's a very prolific writer, and I think if you saw the amount that he writes, you would think that he writes in his sleep. So I was having lunch with Nathan, and Nathan already was very successful in his Facebook platform. And I wasn't aware of that. And he said, Boon, I can help you with your genealogical search. I can help you search for your ancestors. Immediately that tension, that letter all came flooding back. And I said, well, I'm not sure I want to connect with the relatives. I'm not sure they want to connect with us. So he said, don't worry. I mean, just take the journey. All I need is some photos of whatever you have. Just give me whatever you have. And this was January 2024. And he said, Chengmeng's coming, April. Go back to Malacca, do your Chengmeng thing, and take photos of your grandparents' graves or your father's graves or whatever. Right? So at that point in time, I'd just come back from Hong Kong. I'd spent 7 years in Hong Kong, so I've not been doing Chengmeng for many years. That April, I wasn't intending to. Nathan then wrote me a text saying, Boon, Chengmeng's coming. Go back to Malacca and do your Chengmeng thing and take some photos. So I said, okay, I'll do that. So I said to my two brothers, my two brothers were twins, and they're 11 years or 12 years my senior. I was pretty much the youngest in the family. And one of my brothers then said, well, you're not going to have any luck. Your grandfather, paternal side, doesn't have a tomb. I said, what do you mean he doesn't have a tomb? He doesn't have a tomb because he died early. That I know. I said, well, he doesn't have a tomb because he was taken by the Japanese during the occupation, middle of the night, and he never came back. The presumption is that he was killed, he was murdered, and Malacca is such a small place, you can't hide, right? So he doesn't have a tomb, your search will be in vain. So I think when we did Chengmeng, so I took pictures of my father's tombs, my maternal side, and on the paternal side, I only had my grandmother. So I came back, I said to Nathan, Nathan, this is all I have. I don't have my paternal grandfather. The search is dead as far as I was concerned. He took the photo and he said, no, your grandfather's grave is there. I said, no, you don't understand me. My grandfather doesn't have a grave. He was taken by the Japanese, never came back. We don't even know when he died, right? No, it's there. I said, no, you don't understand me, Nathan. It's not there. And it went on several times, to and fro. And then he said, it's on your grandmother's grave. Because your grandfather doesn't have a grave, his details, not his date of death, his detail was actually on the right side of your grandmother's grave. And it wasn't a double grave, it was just a single grave. And this was... Okay. Right. I guess I can't read Chinese myself, right? So on the left side is my grandmother's details and the date of her death. And that's, I think it's 民国 1963, right? 1963, which I think is the Chinese calendar is 民国 11 years before, right? The Republic of China. And 1962 was when I was born, so knew nothing about this. But my grandfather's detail, I can't read Chinese, right? And then he told me, your grandfather's details are there. It tells you where he came from. He says, Guangdong Sheng, Dahao. I presume that's a district, right? So I said, oh, wow, I didn't realize that. And that was like a moment of relief because I thought it was a dead end, right? And a moment of relief, and it's there. And it's like, well, there is a path for you to get across, right? So he said, well, time for you to go to China. But I wasn't sure I wanted to connect with the relatives. I told him I would go. I called up my brothers and sisters, and 4 of us, together with me, decided that we would go in August to Guangzhou, and then from there go to Santou, Chaoyang. I think this says Chaoyang, but in modern China today, that I think has been incorporated into Santou. So we decided to go, and my brothers and sisters were very excited, right? Because we didn't know we could even connect with the ancestral home, because the grandfather died early and we didn't know anything about our relatives in China. Now, I guess with this, we now have a way forward, and we went in August last year. And I think it was a separate trip. It coincided with GSS's trip to Chaoshan last year, but ours was a separate trip. So I went pretty much on the same days, maybe a day later. I went, and we went to Guangzhou first. Ate all the Cantonese food. Went to Shenzhen, went to all the malls. Saw all the high-tech stuff. And then took the high-speed rail to Santou. And when in Santou, on the day that we arrived, we asked for a Didi, and we bounced, we got the whole car. After we called him, we said, we'll get you for the whole day, right? Take us to Dahao. I say, Dahao, 在哪里? Dahao 哪里? Dahao is big. So we said, don't know. We only know Dahao. So the Didi driver wanted to earn his keep. He obviously took us to Dahao, but he knew Dahao is big. So he roamed around Dahao. And after about an hour, he was frustrated. He says, well, we can't just keep going round and round, right? I mean, you're paying me for the day, but you tell me where you want to go. We said we don't know. So we're trying to find our ancestral home. Then he said this, tell me your surname. So our surname, Choo. Our surname is Choo. Then he sent a broadcast on his WeChat to all his friends. Anyone knows where the ancestral home of the Choos in Dahao district? And within 10 minutes, the answer came back. It's in Guangzhou, a village in Guangzhou. And he said, well, it's 50 kilometers from here. That was how big Dahao was. Then we said, yeah, take us there. Take us there. And so he took us there. And Guangzhou was still a villagey, but sort of looked prosperous. It actually looked prosperous. The houses were big, right? It was still villagey. And what do you know? When we arrived there, we took a turn, and the ancestral hall was there. And
oh my gosh, maybe I'm related to you.
There you go.
I'm looking for Jews from Taiwan area, so I mean that's.
Right. Have you been here?
No.
He's how young, that's it's quite close.
It's but it just.
Well,
let me correct you. You are related. It's just a matter of
how far?
So this is the Choo ancestral hall in the village of the Choos. The village had 15,000 people, of which I came to know that 5,000 were Choos, right? So a good third of them were Choos. But in my grandfather's days, that village would have been predominantly Choos. I would have imagined, right? So that was not the best part, right? The best part was when we arrived, only the caretaker of the ancestral hall was there. And so I was with my my oldest brother and 2 sisters. And we then walked around, and the caretaker said, "Hang on, 你们是从马来西亚、新加坡来的？" Yeah, we said yes. 我们找祖宗. Then he says, "Wait, I'll call the village head." So he called the village head. A village head came. The village head called other committee members of the ancestral hall. And we had come unannounced. We just turned up unannounced. And they received us. They received us with immense courtesy. The village head and the chairman of the ancestral hall was this man. These 2 were committee members. And they gave us our jupu. So I got the jupu from these people. The story that they told us is the thing that makes my journey special to me, right? And this is the story that connects the 2 parts, the giving part and the receiving part, right? 1972, at the height of the Cultural Revolution, when all of China was turned upside down, the only time in history, probably, that antiquities were disregarded, parents were abused, teachers were not recognized, learning was discouraged. Everything that we Chinese hold dear was turned upside down, and the people living in the villages like these were in dire straits, reaching out to whoever they could reach out, right, for every little bit of scraps that they could to survive. So they related to me families that were given old clothes, families that were given tins of lard. Even old clothes were matters of celebration. When you receive it in those days, when they were so dire, tins of lard were so precious, you lick it, and that was a treat, right? Of course, not to mention money, if you got money. And at the back of my mind, I recall on our side how acrimonious it was, and how difficult it was for squabbling brothers to come together to even contribute. And to me, that sort of rounded the circle for me about both sides. But the wonderful thing was when they recounted this here, they also said that they were extremely grateful because clearly my family was poor, dysfunctional, and didn't quite represent the kinds of attitude perhaps other families took. But this is where I also know something, and I'll relate this later, right? But to me, you know, one shoe was on one foot and the other was on the other, right? It was a time of their dire desperation, and it was a time when their kin overseas could contribute, and many did contribute. And these people remember. They remember, and they related it to me, right? Now, did I meet my relatives? No, right? Did I find what I thought I was looking for? No. But did I find something else? Yes. And that journey, I think, is unique, precious to me, because it completed a circle that seared my mind when I was a little kid, 10-year-old, thinking, well, we could have done more, but we didn't, right? And here, 50 over years later, I came to see these people who received whatever they received from whoever, and they could articulate how grateful they were. And because of whoever it was that contributed, 他们撑得过, and they could pass the day. To me, that was precious, right? Now, obviously, they gave me this. This is the Jupu. So I can't read. So I think Nathan translated some of it for me. Right? I still haven't figured out yet. But the journey is the important thing. It's not your destination. And it's the same as when I recounted my story in New Zealand to you, that it is the journey that counts. It is not your destination. It is the journey that enriches you. And I found things that I can now resolve in my mind. Why was my father estranged from his brothers? And why were the brothers estranged amongst themselves? I didn't know this. And I only knew that my grandfather died young. All my uncles never had a father figure. And no one could bind the family together and be able to relate back to the village where his other children were. That if he was around, he would have brought the children together and said why you should contribute, and the contribution would have been a lot more willing, a lot more voluntary, and a lot happier. It just wasn't around, right? And I didn't know that he was taken by the Japanese until my brother mentioned this. And because he went away, or he was taken away when my father was very young. My father himself did not broach the idea. So these are the things that I've discovered, and these are the things that sort of now resolve in my mind. I thought that was precious to me. Yeah, I found a Jupu. I have to trace it, but to me now this is less of the object than the journey itself and the experience that it gave me. That is really all I wanted to share with you guys. Yeah, thank you.
Right, okay, right. Reminds me of my journey as well. I couldn't trace, and then I found out of the coup in Penang, and I went back with them to the ancestral village, and I don't know, I couldn't find my grandfather, but then it was also the journey for me. Yeah, thank you very much.